Virginia signed 19 transfers from the transfer portal, as well as 19 high school recruits as well. Big Ray, I got to ask you, Virginia started spring practices on Monday, and as they get geared up for spring ball here, I believe they have their spring game on April 12th. How do you feel about Virginia headed into the new season with 19 new transfers, and what do they got to do to get to a bowl game this year under Tony Elliott?
This is now, I think they have players on the team that can elevate the team. Mm-hmm. Now they need the coaches to elevate their coaching and really develop the dudes and, put them in a position to be successful. I will say, it took me a minute to kind of come around to the way the portal was working. I've always been a fan of the NIL thing, but I like the true nature of the name, image, likeness versus pay to play. And that's what it's turned into is pay to play. And Virginia was never a player in that game because our donor base is more of a wait and see donor base. And it's kind of hard to wait and see in this climate because if you're bringing in recruits and other teams are bringing in transfers, like you're already at a disadvantage. And so to our surprise, we had two donors, one right before the first portal opened, donated like $10 million to the football team and said, I want you to use this $10 million to restructure the football team. And then another donor said, I'm going to match up to $3 million. So whoever the other donations that came in, so you can maximize that and get $16 million going into this portal. And then they've done a really good job of actually using the money. Kind of restructuring the offensive line. Like I've checked in already. I talked to the offensive line coach a lot, and I check into people that are around the team, and they're like, Ray, like the offensive line just looks totally different. They're bigger, they're more athletic, they're more dominant, and that's where we're struggling. And then we have a quarterback there from North Texas that they paid pretty good, who's a pretty dynamic passer. They got some good skill. We've always had some good skill dudes. We just haven't been able to hold up in the trenches. So it looks like, to me, this coaching staff has no excuse. Bowl game should be the minimum. You know what I'm saying? They should really do some damage and make some moves because they have the players to do so now. Before, they didn't. And not all of it, some people will say, well, was Tony Elliott ready or not? But if you rewind, he took the job after Bronco Mendenhall and his staff left right at the signing date. So when those guys left, a lot of the dudes that were recruiting left, and we can talk about how that ended up happening. So it kind of, and then the group that was hit the hardest doing that was the offensive line room. So we had, when Bronco left, there were 3 or 4 starters that transferred out to other schools. One went to Central Florida, one went to USC, another one went somewhere else. And so we were without starters, and so you had dudes that were probably developmental players having to start, and so then you just get crushed in all of that. And so now they've been able to reshape that room, and then you had the shooting where you had a couple guys shot and killed, and then a lot of dudes transferred away from the program during that time. And so, but during all of that time, through all those, most of Virginia's losses were by like 7 points or less. And so they were losing games in the middle 4. They'd give up a touchdown right before halftime and another score right out of the half. And then that would be the difference in the game. They lost like 3 or 4 fourth quarter leads. So they've been right at the door, but they haven't had the players to get them over the hump. Now they have those players. Now the coaching staff has to do what they get paid to do, which is put these dudes in a position to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think one thing about Virginia and their conference, I think they're in a very winnable conference, especially going forward. Who knows what Miami's doing with Carson Beck and the future of that, Bill Belichick and North Carolina now. There's just a lot of different pieces in the ACC. I know what Clemson's going to be like. Like, it's just a lot of different moving pieces. Right. But I got to ask you, going back to the transfer portal in Virginia, signing 19 transfers, I like you mentioned, I think it's pay for play at this point. I think it's fairly obvious. As JB and I said, this is what the NCAA wanted. It's the Wild Wild West, and until they come in and do something about it, which I don't think they really can at this point. I think they're kind of powerless. This is what it is. And so Virginia, like you mentioned, with the donors and stuff, are starting to get their get in the game a little bit and talk about that a little bit, kind of the difference college football 5 years ago to now, even just how much has changed in the NIL transfer portal recruiting Wild Wild West era it is.
Yeah. Well, let me just first say I've always felt like players should be compensated somehow.
For sure.
Even when I played, back I was in Virginia from 87 to 92, and my junior and senior year there, we really elevated that program. We went from a program that was just kind of like almost seen as the Stanford of the ACC. It's a huge academic standards school, hard to get into, hard to get those types of athletes in there. And then we just hit a stretch of like 3 years or so where we're always in the top 10 or 15 teams. My junior year, we're number one in the country for about a month. And had our quarterback not gotten hurt, we probably would have been playing Miami for the national championship type of thing, because we were just on that type of roll. And so we had jerseys, stadiums filled, like all this money has been moved. And then we're getting like free lunch. It's like I came to UVA, man. I had one backpack, one pair of jeans, 2 or 3 shirts, and a pair of shoes. That's all I had. Mm-hmm. And I was supposed to survive at this university on that. And then people say, well, you get this free education. Well, even the education is limited, so right. It's like there's only certain classes you can take and certain majors you can have because of your schedule. So I always compare it to if someone sold you a house on the lake and told you couldn't use the lake, but they're going to charge you the same amount as the other house. It's like, well, no, you can't do that because my house is diminished a little bit because I can't even put my boat in the water, Right, and so it's a little bit like that, before this in college sports where, yeah, you can go to these great universities, but man, it's hard to go to UVA and major in engineering, which is one of their big programs there. It's hard to go to UVA and be pre-law and play sports. It's hard to go to UVA and be pre-med and play sports. It's really hard to do. You know what I'm saying? And so you end up taking these sociology, like, random, just, you've been there, like team.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so I've always felt that there should be some type of compensation. And so I'm glad that, and in some places it was happening anyway. Like the nice little handshake after the game full of cash kind of a thing. And so now, like, it's just everybody's doing it and it's legal. And so, like you said earlier, just kind of reeling it in a little bit. And I don't want to put a whole ton of regulations around it, but just reeling it in a little bit so that so there is some time a rhyme or reason to it. And then it is good to hear stuff like you were just saying about Travis sharing, to the NIL to help other players, because to me, that's always been one of the biggest issues. Like if you're just happen to be the starter and you're making millions of dollars and I'm out here blocking for you and I'm getting a free hamburger up the street, it's like, hold on, bro. Like, how is this supposed to work? Like, that's not right. You know what I'm saying? And so it is good to hear. And you hear other stories of guys doing that kind of stuff. So it is kind of the wild, wild west. I don't know that the NCAA can step in and do anything to it, but there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to create the change that's needed so that it's still a thing that is operating, but just not as much gunslinger kind of thing about it.
Right. And it is wild, the kind of era we're in with college football. Just hearing the stories from Matt McChesney and those who are in college coaching or dealing in recruiting, the amount of tampering, legalized tampering, literally, that goes on. It is just insane. Just the way college football has evolved the last 5 years. I mean, since the last time you and I have even spoken, it is just crazy the way that it has changed. But yeah, I think you have gave a great perspective on it for sure.